Mara lived in the sprawling city of Atrana, with its cobbled streets and chimneys that belched smoke into the grey skies. While others went about their daily lives, selling wares, attending schools, or rushing to work, Mara spent much of her time avoiding the world. Her peculiar gift set her apart, and she feared the ridicule it might bring. Since she was a child, Mara had known that her stomach wasn't like others. While most people could eat a hearty meal and feel full, Mara's stomach could stretch beyond reason, expanding like an endless balloon. It didn't hurt, and she never grew sick, but the sight of her swollen belly had caused her enough embarrassment to keep her secret. Still, Mara wasn't ashamed of her oddity, just cautious. Over time, she began to see her ability as less of a curse and more of a gift waiting for its purpose. That purpose arrived one winter evening, when the frost painted the city in shades of white and blue, and the wind bit like an invisible beast. Mara had been wandering the streets in search of scraps to eat when she heard soft voices coming from a shadowy alley. She turned the corner and froze. Huddled together under a highway, there were several groups of homeless children, many with only a torn blanket. Mara took a liking to a group of 5 boys, no older than 12, their faces pale from hunger and their eyes hollowed by despair. They looked up as she approached. "What do you want?" asked the tallest boy, his voice wary. Mara crouched, her breath misting in the air. "I'm not here to hurt you," she said gently. "Are you hungry?" The boys hesitated before the smallest one, Sam, nodded. "We haven't eaten in days," he murmured. Mara thought for a moment, her heart aching. She had little food herself, but her strange ability gave her an idea so wild it made her cheeks flush. Could this be her purpose? She knelt closer. "I have a way to help you," she said. "But it's different. My stomach is special. If you trust me, I can keep you safe and warm, and I'll make sure you never go hungry again." The boys exchanged skeptical glances. "Special how?" asked another boy, Luke. Mara smiled, standing up. "Follow me. I'll show you." Mara led the boys to a quiet park on the edge of Atrana, where frost clung to the grass like tiny crystals. The park was deserted, the air filled only with the distant hoot of an owl and the whisper of wind through barren branches. Under the pale glow of a lamppost, Mara laid out the food she had managed to buy with her last few coins. A loaf of crusty bread, a roasted chicken glistening with juices, a steaming bowl of vegetable stew, and a small, golden-crusted apple pie. The boys' eyes widened as they stared at the spread. For weeks, their stomachs had ached with hunger, surviving on scraps and stolen bits of food. This was a feast beyond their wildest dreams. "Are you really going to eat all that?" Luke, the oldest boy, asked, his voice tinged with disbelief. Mara smiled, patting her stomach. "Every bite. Watch carefully." She began eating, methodically working through the meal. Each bite seemed impossibly large to the boys, and yet her stomach swelled effortlessly, expanding like a balloon filling with air. First, the loaf of bread disappeared, then the roasted chicken, followed by the warm stew. The boys watched, their astonishment growing with each bite. By the time she finished the apple pie, Mara's belly was immense, round and taut beneath her coat. "Whoa," Sam, the youngest, whispered. "Doesn't that hurt?" "Not at all," Mara said, rubbing her stomach affectionately. "There's plenty of space in here, and it's warm. Now, it's your turn." The boys exchanged hesitant glances. "You're serious?" Luke asked. "Completely," Mara said. "It'll feel strange at first, but I promise it's safe. You'll see." She knelt down, opening her mouth wide to show them the passage inside. It wasn't dark or foreboding as they'd feared. Instead, a soft golden glow emanated from within, the light flickering like a distant sunrise. Sam stepped forward, curiosity outweighing his fear. He hesitated at the threshold, peering into the warm, glowing tunnel. "It's not what I expected," he said. With Mara's gentle encouragement, Sam climbed in. He felt the soft warmth of her tongue beneath him, its surface surprisingly smooth and springy. The moment he slid further, gravity seemed to guide him down. He felt a gentle pull, like being carried along a slow-moving current. As Sam descended, the tunnel around him glowed faintly, illuminating the soft, undulating walls. The air grew warmer, carrying a comforting scent of bread and roasted chicken. The walls pulsed rhythmically, and though they moved around him, it didn't feel suffocating. Instead, it felt like a soft, cradling embrace, guiding him deeper into the warm sanctuary below. The journey was quiet, save for the occasional distant gurgle. Sam felt as if he was sliding into a living, breathing cave, a space that welcomed him without hesitation. Finally, he landed with a soft bounce onto the spongy floor of Mora's stomach. The space was larger than he could have imagined. The golden glow bathed everything in light, and the walls shimmered faintly with an otherworldly sheen. The air was thick but fresh, carrying the comforting smells of the meal Mora had eaten. "It's incredible," Sam said aloud, his voice echoing slightly. The others heard his voice from outside and exchanged nervous glances. "How does it feel in there?" Luke called out. "It's warm," Sam shouted back. "And soft. It's nice, actually." Encouraged by Sam's enthusiasm, the other boys began to climb in, one by one. Mora felt a strange, but not unpleasant sensation as Sam slid down her throat. It tickled slightly, and she instinctively placed a hand on her stomach, feeling the faintest flutter as he descended. It wasn't uncomfortable. If anything, it was oddly fulfilling. A warmth spread through her chest, not from the physical act, but from the knowledge that she was offering safety and comfort to someone who desperately needed it. When the second boy, Luke, climbed in, Mora giggled. "That tickles," she said, her voice vibrating softly around him as he slid down. "It feels weird," Luke called out as he was gently carried downward. The tunnel was just as Sam had described, warm, soft, and glowing faintly. By the time the third and fourth boys followed, Mora's stomach felt full, but not in the way it did with food. It was a fullness that came with purpose, with knowing she was protecting these children. "Are you all okay in there?" she asked, placing her hand on her swollen belly. "Yes," came their muffled voices from within. The boys had expected the interior of Mora's stomach to be dark, cramped, and slimy, something out of a nightmare. But what they discovered instead was a world that defied imagination. When Sam first landed inside, he gasped, his voice echoing faintly in the golden space. The floor beneath him was soft and springy, like walking on a bed of moss. The walls glowed gently, their shimmering golden hue creating an ambience that was both soothing and otherworldly. Luke followed shortly after, landing with a bounce. He stood up, brushing himself off, and stared in awe. This doesn't make sense," he muttered, running his hands along the wall. The surface was warm and smooth, with a texture somewhere between velvet and silk. It pulsed faintly, as though alive, and the warmth radiating from it was comforting rather than oppressive. "It's like a whole different world," Sam said, spinning in place. The others arrived one by one, their reactions ranging from nervous laughter to outright wonder. By the time all 5 boys were inside, they were exploring like children in a magical forest. The air inside Mora's stomach was surprisingly fresh. It was warm and slightly humid, carrying a faint, pleasant aroma of the meal Mora had eaten earlier. The scent of roasted chicken and apple pie lingered like a memory, mingling with a subtle sweetness that none of the boys could identify, but all found comforting. Every sound within the space was gentle and rhythmic. They could hear the steady thrum of Mora's heartbeat, a soothing drumbeat that reminded them they were safe. Occasionally, the soft gurgle of digestion echoed around them, but it was never loud or unpleasant, more like the distant murmur of a stream. Sam pressed his ear against one of the walls. "I can hear her breathing," he said, smiling. "It's like we're a part of her." "It's incredible," Luke said, lying back on the spongy floor. He stretched his arms out, marveling at the glow overhead. "It's nothing like I thought it would be. It feels like home." The golden walls stretched high above them, curving slightly inward as they reached the ceiling. The light they emitted wasn't harsh or glaring. It was soft, like sunlight filtering through stained glass. The boys couldn't tell where the light came from, but it filled the space with warmth and made it feel alive. The boys quickly began to explore their new home. They discovered that the walls had a subtle bounce to them, allowing them to leap and tumble without fear of injury. Sam, the smallest, began jumping around gleefully, laughing as he bounced higher with each leap. "Careful, Sam," Luke called, though he couldn't help but smile at the boy's excitement. "Come on, Luke," Sam shouted. "It's like a trampoline." Even Luke, usually the serious one, couldn't resist the temptation. Soon, all 5 boys were jumping and laughing, their voices echoing softly in the golden chamber. As they calmed down, they began to notice smaller details. The walls weren't just glowing. They seemed to shimmer, as though tiny particles of light were flowing through them. When Sam pressed his hand against the surface, he felt a gentle warmth spread through his palm. "It's alive," he whispered, awestruck. "Of course it's alive," said another boy, grinning. "It's Mara." Though they were inside Mara's stomach, they could still hear her voice clearly when she spoke to them. "How are you boys doing in there?" she asked, her voice muffled but warm. "We're great," Sam shouted back, his voice bouncing off the walls. "It's amazing in here." Mara giggled, and they felt the gentle vibrations of her laughter through the walls. "I'm glad you're comfortable. If you need anything, just let me know. Do you feel us?" Luke asked, curiosity getting the better of him. Mara placed a hand on her belly, smiling to herself. "A little. It's like feeling tiny butterflies moving around inside. It doesn't hurt. It's kind of nice." The boys grinned at each other, reassured by her words. As the days passed, the boys began to make the space their own. Mara gave them scraps of fabric and small trinkets, which she carefully swallowed to bring to them. They used the fabric to create small nests along the walls, tucking themselves into cozy corners when they wanted to rest. Sam started calling the space the Golden Haven, a name that quickly caught on. The boys began to see it not as Mara's stomach, but as their sanctuary, a safe place where the cold streets and harsh world outside couldn't reach them. They discovered they could request foods they liked, and Mara would eat them, ensuring the boys were always surrounded by comforting smells. On one occasion, she ate an entire tray of cinnamon rolls at their request, filling the space with the sweet, spicy scent of cinnamon and sugar. "It's like living in a bakery," one boy joked, inhaling deeply. When they weren't eating or playing, the boys would sit together and share stories of their past lives. Though their memories of the streets were painful, they found solace in knowing they no longer had to endure that hardship. "This is our home now," Luke said one night, his voice steady. "And Mara, she's our family." The others nodded in agreement, their hearts full of gratitude. For Mara, the experience was unlike anything she had imagined. Feeling the boys move inside her wasn't uncomfortable. It was a constant reminder that she was doing something meaningful. Her strange gift, which had once made her feel isolated and ashamed, now brought her a sense of purpose. She often sat with her hands resting on her belly, speaking softly to the boys inside. She loved hearing their laughter and knowing they were safe. It was as though her body had become a vessel for their happiness and well-being. At night, she would hum lullabies, her voice vibrating gently through the walls. The boys would listen in silence, their eyes growing heavy as they drifted off to sleep. "You're my family too," Mara whispered one evening, her voice full of emotion. Inside, the boys smiled, feeling truly comfortable inside this beautiful stomach they now call home. Days turned into weeks. The boys grew used to their new home, finding joy in the strange world Mara had created for them. Whenever they wanted fresh air, Mara would let them climb out, and they'd spend hours exploring the city or playing in the park before retreating back into her stomach. They became a family, each boy finding a role in their new life. Sam, the youngest, loved exploring the glowing walls and inventing stories about the Golden Cave. Luke, the oldest, took charge of planning meals, carefully suggesting foods that would nourish them all. "Mara," Sam asked one day, his voice echoing faintly inside her belly, "how can your stomach do all this?" Mara laughed softly, her voice a comforting rumble around them. "I don't know," she admitted. "I just know it's something I was meant to do." The boys often told Mara how grateful they were. She had saved them from the cold, the hunger, and the hopelessness of the streets. "You're our guardian angel," Luke said one evening as they settled in after a feast of roasted chicken and apple pie. The days had settled into a peaceful routine. Mara had become the boys' protector and home, while they brought her joy and purpose. Inside her belly, the boys had crafted a life for themselves, a world filled with comfort and camaraderie. They had even started joking that they were the keepers of the Golden Haven, a name Sam had coined for the warm, glowing sanctuary inside Mara's stomach. But life has a way of testing even the strongest bonds, and their unusual family was about to face its greatest challenge. It started with a faint discomfort in Mara's belly, a cramp so small she barely noticed it. She chalked it up to something she had eaten and carried on with her day. But by evening, the discomfort had grown into a sharp, stabbing pain that made her double over. Inside her stomach, the boys felt the change immediately. The walls around them, which were usually warm and steady, began to quiver. The golden glow dimmed slightly, and the gentle pulsing of Mara's heartbeat became irregular. "What's going on?" Sam asked, his voice trembling. Luke pressed his hand against the wall, feeling the faint tremors. "Something's wrong. Mara doesn't feel right." The boys huddled together, their worry mounting as the walls began to spasm. A distant gurgle echoed through the chamber, louder and more ominous than usual. "Mara!" Luke shouted, his voice muffled as he pounded on the wall. "Can you hear us? What's happening?" Mara tried to respond, but her voice was weak, her breath coming in short gasps. She staggered, clutching her belly, her vision swimming. A sharp pain shot through her, leaving her dizzy and disoriented. As the boys tried to understand what was happening, Luke noticed something strange. The soft floor beneath their feet was growing firmer, and a foul smell began to fill the air. A sharp, acidic tang that wasn't normal. The walls around them pulsed erratically, and the once gentle gurgles turned into harsh, wet roars. "It's her stomach acid," Luke realized, his face pale. "It's building up too much. If it keeps going like this, it could hurt her. And us. What do we do?" Sam asked, his voice shaking. Luke thought quickly. Mara's stomach reacts to what she eats, right? If we can trigger a reaction to calm things down, we might be able to save her. "But how?" another boy asked. Luke looked around, his mind racing. "She just ate, but maybe we can use what's left of the food to neutralize the acid." The boys split up, searching the chamber for remnants of the meal Mara had eaten earlier. They found small chunks of bread and bits of apple pie scattered across the spongy floor. "Bread can help absorb acid," Luke said, gathering as much as he could. "And sugar might help balance things out. Let's push it into the walls. It should trigger a reaction." The boys worked together, pushing the bread and pie into the quivering walls of the stomach. The walls responded immediately, absorbing the food and sending faint ripples through the space. "It's working," Sam shouted as the acidic smell began to fade. Encouraged, the boys continued, using their small hands to press the food into every surface they could reach. The walls began to glow brighter, and the pulsing rhythm of Mara's heartbeat grew steadier. "Mara, hold on!" Luke shouted, hoping she could hear them. Mara felt as though she were on the edge of consciousness, her body struggling against the overwhelming pain. But then, a strange sensation spread through her belly, a warmth that eased the sharp edges of the pain. The spasms began to subside, and her breathing grew easier. She placed a trembling hand on her stomach, feeling the faint, rhythmic movements inside. "The boys," she whispered, her voice thick with emotion. "They're helping me." As the warmth spread, Mara's vision cleared, and the crushing pain in her chest began to fade. She sat up slowly, her hands still on her belly, tears streaming down her face. "You saved me," she whispered, her voice full of gratitude. Inside, the boys collapsed onto the spongy floor, exhausted but relieved. The golden glow had returned, brighter than ever, and the rhythmic hum of Mara's heartbeat was strong and steady. "We did it," Luke said, a tired smile spreading across his face. Sam hugged him tightly, tears of relief streaming down his cheeks. "I thought we were going to lose her," he said. "So did I," Luke admitted, his voice shaking. Mara's voice echoed around them, gentle and filled with emotion. "Thank you, boys. I don't know how you did it, but you saved my life. We're a family," Luke said, his voice firm. "That's what families do." In the days that followed, Mara and the boys grew closer than ever. The crisis had reminded them of how much they meant to each other, and they vowed to take better care of one another. Mara began paying closer attention to her health, while the boys became even more vigilant about their unique role as the keepers of her stomach. Their bond, forged in the warmth of the Golden Haven, was now unbreakable, and though life would surely bring more challenges, they knew they could face anything together.